All right, if you're building or even just using AI in any kind of regulated industry, you already know the stakes are incredibly high. So today, we're going to break down how to prepare for something that's pretty much inevitable. What happens when your AI system fails? We're going to cover audit, evidence, and incident response.
We have to start with this quote because it gets right to the heart of the matter. In these high-stakes environments, it's just not good enough for a system to work most of the time. The moment something goes wrong, and trust me, it will, the real test isn't just about the damage. It's all about your ability to go back, reconstruct exactly what happened, and explain with total confidence why it happened.
And that, right there, is the million-dollar question with AI. See, traditional software is deterministic, right? It follows a script. But AI? Well, it's often probabilistic. It's literally designed to change and adapt. So how on earth do you investigate a system when its very nature is to be a little unpredictable? That is the puzzle we are going to solve today. So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the explainability mandate, then get into the huge difference between evidence and logs. We'll look at what makes AI incidents so unique, and then dive into designing for response and control, which ultimately is how we build real trust in these systems. Okay, let's jump right in. First up, the explainability mandate. This isn't just some nice to have. In a lot of fields, it's a hard requirement, and it's the entire reason the audit process even exists in the first place. So when we say audit, what are we really talking about? At its core, it's just about making sure you can piece the story back together later. You need to be able to show what the system did, exactly when it did it, and this is the most important part, why it did it. If you can't do that, your fancy AI just becomes an unexplainable black box when it matters most. And that brings us to a really crucial distinction, one that a lot of teams get wrong. We have to stop thinking just about collecting logs and start thinking about capturing evidence. They are not the same thing.
Yeah, this really lays it out perfectly. Logs, they tell you what happened. A process started, a calculation was made. That's it. Evidence, that's the whole story. It gives you the context to understand why it happened. And let me tell you, without the why, your investigation is going nowhere fast.
So what is this evidence we're talking about? It's the whole shebang. It's the exact inputs that went in and the outputs that came out. It's the record of every human decision and approval along the way. And it's a snapshot of the system state at that precise moment. It's literally the complete package you need to do a real investigation. So the bottom line here is simple, but it is so critical. If your whole audit strategy is just, we'll save the logs, then your strategy is fundamentally broken. It's just not going to be enough when you actually need to figure out a root cause. Okay, so moving on. Understanding the need for evidence is so important because, as we'll see in this next section, AI incidents are a totally different kind of animal. An AI incident isn't always some big, dramatic crash with alarms blaring. A lot of the time, it's a quiet, subtle failure. It could be outputs that are just a tiny bit off, something you wouldn't notice for weeks, or maybe a model's performance slowly, silently drifting over time, or even just an automated system that fails to stop when it's supposed to. And because these failures are so sneaky, you can't afford to be passive. You can't just wait for them to announce themselves. Finding them requires you to be intentionally and actively monitoring. You absolutely have to define your thresholds ahead of time so you know the second a system starts to color outside the lines. You've got to be looking for trouble. So, if these subtle incidences are bound to happen, how do we deal with them? Well, that brings us to our fourth point, response by design. The key takeaway here, you cannot improvise your way back to control in the middle of a crisis. It has to be built in from the very beginning. A properly designed response means your system has 4 capabilities baked right in. First, a big red button, a way to rapidly halt everything. Second, a clear pathway to escalate to a human. Third, the ability to roll back to a safe state or contain the damage. And finally, a way to automatically preserve all that precious evidence for the investigation later. These are totally non-negotiable. Okay, so what does a system that can actually do all this look like? Let's get into our 5th section and look at the anatomy of a controllable system. This is the architectural blueprint that makes all these ideas real. Now, I know this diagram looks a little complicated at first glance, but the idea behind it is actually incredibly simple and powerful. It's all about separating your concerns. You see those 3 horizontal layers? We call them planes. You've got control up top, execution in the middle, and evidence and audit at the bottom. Let's quickly break them down. So that control plane up top, think of that as a human command center. It's where we set policies and give approvals.
The execution plane in the middle, that's the engine room. That's where all the IT and operational systems are actually doing the work. And holding it all together at the bottom is the evidence and audit plane, which is quietly recording everything we need for that reconstruction we talked about earlier.
But here's the really brilliant part. This architecture gives you pre-planned response paths. Those amber approval gates you see? Those are your deliberate checkpoints for human review. But even more important, look at those red lines. Those are your escape hatches. They aren't last-minute hacks. They are fully engineered, tested pathways to stop, revert, and safely get control back.
Okay, let's bring it all home with our final section. We're talking about building for trust. And the key is that trust isn't an accident. It's the direct result of making these things design requirements, not just preferences.
If you walk away with just one thing from this whole explainer, please let it be this. Auditability, evidence capture, designed response, these are not features you can just tack on at the end. They have to be core architectural requirements from day one. You can't build a skyscraper and then try to add the foundation later.
And just to be super clear about the scope here, what we've done is explain the core principles you need to design AI systems that can actually be investigated. But what this is not is a specific how-to guide for your particular industry's regulations, and it definitely doesn't approve any specific system for use. The goal here is to get your teams thinking the right way from the start.
Because ultimately, this is how we get to trustworthy AI. The goal isn't to build a perfect system that never fails. That's a fantasy. The goal is to build a resilient system where, when failures happen, they can be reliably found, easily explained, and quickly fixed. That's how you stay in control. So I'll just leave you with this one question to take back to your team, to your projects. Look at what you're building and ask yourself honestly, is this system just built to run, or is it truly built to be investigated?